Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this last poster session of the 6th Expanding Opportunities Seminar of English Teaching. My name is Fernanda Herrera. I'm a coordinator in the We Learn program from Fundación Educacional Oportunidad, and I'm very happy to be here with you in this great session. On behalf of the organizers of this seminar, Fundación Educacional Oportunidad and Universidad de La Serena, I thank you all for being here. We would like to invite you to be an active part of this event and post your selfies and comments on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram using the hashtag Expanding Opportunities. As well as the other sessions, this event is being transmitted via Zoom and is also streaming live on Facebook in the account of Fundación Educacional Oportunidad. If you are joining us through the streaming platform, we invite you to leave your comments on the chat box and your questions in the question section at the right side of the screen. If you are participating through Facebook, you can leave your questions and comments there. To start, I'd like to welcome our posters presenters today, Raul Rodriguez, Ángela Palma, Esteban Salgado, Madeleine Zamora, Francisca Guajardo, and Marcelo Andrade. Thank you, teachers, for being here. As we present, each poster link would be shared on the chat box, so you can visit them on our website. As the previous session, each poster presenter or team presenters will have 10 minutes to share their experience. After all posters have been presented, we will have 30 minutes to answer some of your questions. So please, don't be shy and ask whatever you need to take the best of these experiences with you. So join me to give a big warm welcome to the first poster presenter of today, Raul Rodriguez from Viña del Mar, with the poster Some Tips to Have an Awesome Class.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much, Fernanda, for the introduction. My name, as Fernanda already told you, is Raul Rodriguez. I am from Radical English, which is a language institute I actually created myself last year. Originally, I was going to work only with adults, but a lot of things changed thanks to this unusual situation we are in, and most of my students are teenagers or children these days. So that's what motivated me to actually come here and share with you a presentation which will be mostly based on materials development and my experience and my learners' experience with such materials. First of all, I guess I should show you what are some of these awesome materials, right? Well, maybe they will not look that awesome at the beginning, but trust me, it will get a bit better. So let's continue with this idea. As you can see, they are really simple looking, but the reason for that is that my materials follow the idea that I am not the only designer of the materials. My students are, and that is reflected in this way. For example, these original materials can be transformed into whatever interest my students may have. So if I have an adult student who is interested in becoming a better parent for their children, we can talk about that, and they had to choose different images they could share and talk about them. Also, in the case of health, it happened the same. In the other cases, we have some board games that were empty originally, but depending on the interest of my students, such as sports or education, they can be transformed into something we can actually share together, something we can learn about, and that somehow respects their learning identities. Because for me, that is one of the problems I had perceived, that somehow my learners needed a space where they could be themselves instead of having to follow a structured curriculum that was just handed to them. And that is actually something I want to achieve with Radical English and with this type of intervention as well. As you can see, a lot of the materials are things that my learners create. One of the activities I particularly like and that they tend to enjoy a lot is this one, where you have one person describing a picture and the other person is not looking at the picture but has to draw it basing on the descriptions. It's a very nice activity, especially if you don't impose the image on the learners, but take the chance that technology gives us and just give them a few minutes to find an image that is relevant to them in the topic of the class, of course. It can be something maybe related to family or to landscapes or to a different part of a house. As well, on the same line, something that has been extremely productive in my experience this year has been the use of Google Documents in order to give some more active feedback to writing, which is what you can see at the bottom of this slide. Here, the idea is that I somehow provide implicit feedback to my learners. I don't really correct the mistakes, but I highlight that there is a problem somewhere. Of course, I also give them positive feedback as well. But for example, they have to realize if there is a problem with a missing word or there is a problem with verb tenses or punctuation, for example. Everything is signaled in a different color. The idea of this is that the learners can also self-evaluate like this and become more aware, like raising their metacognitive awareness on their writing process. For me, that is very important and it gives a valuable tool that somehow was not even present in presential education, or at least not as explicitly. So, at least in my experience, in terms of writing, it has been a very positive situation. Moving on, most of the materials, for those of you who may be somehow acquainted with international tests or standardized exams for certification, I actually based on them originally. However, I also realized that there is no need for me or for the test to impose the type of image. The learners can do so, and it can become much more meaningful like that. So we can decide on a topic that is relevant to my particular learners, and they choose the set of pictures. Obviously, the same happens and applies to the picture description, which is something they actually quite enjoyed. Having to find a picture, having to draw it blindly in a way, and then sharing with each other the picture and realizing how similar or different it was from the original idea. That was quite interesting and actually helped to build a stronger community within the class. Well, most of my sessions so far are one-on-one. That is also something you need to know. But I still feel that, especially with the possibility of working with different small groups, it is still possible to be transferable to different settings. Now, if you would like to know how do I choose the materials for my learners, basically I use the same activities I already showed you. In some cases, the information is gathered in a more implicit way. For example, asking my learners to define themselves. So in this case, we have a person who told me he's a physiotherapist, for example, that he considers sports very important, or his family, or he has a hobby for cooking, which is something that can be reflected on the class materials we choose together. In some cases, it can be far more explicit, like even directly asking the learners, especially after some lessons, what contents could be relevant for them to cover. Of course, when you have a more standard curriculum to follow, there could be some constraints, but there is still some possibility for some actual pedagogical freedom that I feel we should all take the chance to use actually a bit more, especially in a situation that if you can have a synchronous class, can be quite beneficial. Regarding the response of my learners, other than informal conversation, I basically used two different instruments. One was a SWOT analysis that we developed together in class with each of my learners. The second one was a tier list, which some of you may know for situations like the one on the right side, where someone can rank, for example, Disney movies or Marvel movies or music bands according to their own preference. However, in this case, we clearly based on the materials or the class, which ones were the favorite ones for them, which ones were maybe not so good. In this case, I only provided one example for each, but of course it will depend on the learner. In general, the materials have had some quite good reception, if I say so myself, but it's still always some room to improve, and having the feedback of my learners always proves to be quite valuable in that sense. Finally, about the conclusions, I feel it's really fair to simply use the same activity I showed you at the beginning. So, the first conclusion that for me is very important and very transferable to almost any context that can have synchronous session is that we shouldn't take for granted that our learners are digital natives. They may be very well versed in using social media or video games, but they will not necessarily use Google Drive or other platforms as well. So they may need some time to actually develop the skills to do so. Along the same lines, they also have to be taken into account to choose the best materials for them. For professional adults, in my experience, using research papers can be very interesting if it suits their interests. The same with video games, music, series. The internet gives room for a lot of possible materials. Also, this situation has made me think a lot about normality. What is normal and how can we go back to this supposed new normal? I don't think that normal is really far away. We still need to empathize with our students, connect with them, and listen to them. And finally, this is also a great chance to know our own selves as teachers, as professionals who have to know we have our own limitations and beliefs about technology, things we can improve and things we can show and somehow model to our learners that they can also improve. Let's all take this chance to have all of us an awesome class. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you. Mhm. Okay, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Yes, Raul, powerful insights. Thank you very much for presenting this interesting and special methodology in your Radical English Institute. Thank you very much.
Thank
We are
you.
very happy because we have more than 150 viewers listening now. So if some of you have questions for Raul, please type his name and the question on the question section, okay? Now, it's time to greet our next presenters. From Juan Luis Undurraga School, Ángela Palma and Esteban Salgado brings us their poster. We are on Facebook.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Ángela Palma, and this is my colleague Esteban Salgado, and today we're going to be talking about We're on Facebook, which is a project we created since our students didn't have internet access. So yeah, Esteban is going to start talking about it.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Esteban, and today I'm going to talk about our experience called We Are on Facebook. So, since in-person classes were affected by the pandemic, we were trying to look for some strategies to get in touch with our students. So, first, we tried to use our job email to send and receive the activities that we prepared, but it didn't have much success. At the same time, our school was working with Google Drive, uploading all the material they needed, but also it didn't work because some of our students didn't have access to internet. After that, we received an idea and we created teacher's Facebook profile, and we created groups. Every sorry Each group for every class, from first grade up to eighth grade. So I'm going to show you some of the things that we shared on these groups. Here we can see the profile of one group. We also shared important information, questions, and of course, worksheets. Here you can see some of them. Also, we shared videos reinforcing the vocabulary that we taught, like this. Okay, so one thing that is important is that Facebook is for free here in our country, so everyone can have access to it, and it's really easy to use it because students just took a picture and then send it to us. As simple as that. Also, another advantage of using Facebook is that you can see the viewers of your posts, and also you can leave comments when you have to give feedback to your students.
And thank you, Sarah. And if we have to talk about the steps that we had to take, I think we can divide it into 5 steps. So the first one was when we first heard this experience because the head department of science started working with Facebook. And I'm the head department of English at the school, so I was like, we can use this. But we wanted to teach English, so it was going to be different. So the second step was when I shared this experience with the English department, and they were like, yeah, we can upload videos and do the things that we do at the class. And after that, we went to share this experience with our vice principal, and she liked this idea. So she required us an official document to make it official. So after that, we submitted the official document, which was the step number 4. And then finally, which would be the step number 5, we started working. We created the group, and then we started inviting people. But if we need to talk about the impact, I could say that at first it wasn't what we were expecting because we didn't have all the kids we wanted to have on the group. We didn't have a lot of people, so we were very disappointed. And some of us, and I think that we all wanted to give up at some point. So what we did was to change our strategy, and we used the help of the homeroom teachers. So they sent the links to the students, and also we created some worksheets in which we added the link for the groups on Facebook. And after all those things that we did, we reached even 80% of contact with the students, which I think is very successful because we started with no contact, 0%. And also we received like 65% of activities that the students were doing, and we could even give 65% of feedback to them. So yeah, we made it.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so to conclude our presentation, I'm going to talk about some things that we learned. Most of them were related to a better communication. So first we can say that Facebook can create an effective and accessible space to communicate, with our students. Also, Facebook helps to maintain the teaching learning process with all those families that cannot pay for the internet. Another conclusion is that we think that efficient communication plus a really easy use of the platform make it as Facebook as a really good and useful tool for online teaching in these pandemic times. Also, we think that uploading activities regularly, in our case, it was once a week, that creates more communication between your students and you as teachers. And finally, we can say that Facebook makes education more accessible to everyone. So as I said before, here in Chile, Facebook is for free. So you can have access in a more easy way, in an easier way.
Yeah. And I would also like to say that even though this experience was successful for us, because as I said before, we had 0 contact with our students, and then we had even 80% in some groups, it depends on the groups that you're working with, because it's gonna be different if you work with first graders and the eighth graders. And also, like, I think that if you want to replicate this before doing it, it's very important to take into account three main questions. So the first one could be, am I authorized to apply this type of experience at my school or place that I work at? Because as I said before, we were authorized, but we also had to submit an official document to make it official. And also, how can I reach more students through this tool? That would be like the second question, because it is very important to see how we're going to send links to our students for them to be part of the group, and also add questions to filter the participants that are joining our groups. And the third question, and I think that could be, for me, the most important one, is with what groups can I apply this, and also what teachers could be willing to do it. Because as we already know, there are some teachers that technology and all things related to this become a problem. So it is very important to ask if they are willing to do it, and also if they're willing to do it. I think it's very important to help one another, because that's what we were doing. Some of us that using Facebook is easier, we're creating tutorials to help the others. So I think it's very important that if you're working with this, you have to help one another. And yeah, that is, we're on Facebook. So if you have any questions or comments or something that you'd like to say, you can ask them at the end of the presentations. And thank you very much for letting us share our experience with you all.
Thank you very much, Angela and Esteban, for presenting this creative online teaching and learning experience. I agree with you, Angela. It's collaborative work, everything, fundamental. So thank you. Thank you. And we want to say hello also to all our audience today, people from lots of different places. Let me take a breath in to say that we have people from Antofagasta, Putaendo, Puerto Montt, Puerto Guadal, Arica, Cauquenes, Puerto Natales, Viña del Mar, Chile Chico, Coinco, Valparaíso, Puerto Saavedra, La Unión, Temuco, Coquimbo, Talcahuano, Yayay, Paredones, Calama, La Serena y Punta Arenas. A big audience today. In fact, we have people from different countries: Mendoza, Argentina, Mexico, and Israel. Oh my God, it's a huge audience. So now we are very happy to say that we are going to listen to the experience of two teachers from rural schools in the Elqui Valley. Please welcome Madeline Zamora and Francisca Guajardo with their poster promoting the use of English through speaking competitions.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for Francisca and I to be here today, sharing our experience and also learning from other teachers in our country. This time has been a great challenge for us in all ways, but we've had the chance to come up with different plans to overcome those problems. So now I'm going to share how my fellow teachers and I did. Well, in our school, all departments had been carrying out different activities that involved students' participation. And when our turn came, we decided to take these two competitions that take place every year. They are Spelling Bee and Public Speaking. As you may know, Spelling Bee is an activity that involves spelling words correctly, presenting them in a certain way to get the highest score possible. And here we decided to include three categories. The first one is first and second grade, okay, the younger levels. Category 2, third and fourth grade, and category 3, fifth and sixth grade. All this with the purpose to be fair in terms of level. The students were given a set of words with three different levels of difficulty. Those are easy, medium, and hard. Well, considering that in a normal situation, we would prepare our students in class using varied strategies to do it. This time we sent a list of words in advance, okay? It was different from a normal event where they cannot see the words before the competition. We chose this way considering that even when we have the chance to chat or call our students to provide support, the type of support is not the same than in class, okay? And during this time, also the students were working on their own or with their parents. So it was a way to help them to practice in a better way. Finally, they had to send a video, okay, with a certain structure, introducing themselves, spelling 3 words by category, and finally saying goodbye, okay? In the case of public speaking, we set 2 categories. The first one was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, and the second one was 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, okay, also considering their levels. This competition involves presenting a topic with a certain structure and other requirements of our presentation, like fluency, voice, body expression, etc. Well, for this competition, students were given a set of topics, okay, like general topics from which they could choose. For example, if the topic was music, they could choose a singer, a music genre, a festival, etc. So the idea was to provide a range of topics to make it more interesting for them and to motivate more students. Okay, well, they had to present this topic in a video with a minimum of 1 minute and 30 seconds and a maximum of 2 minutes and 30 seconds. They could include pictures on the video, printed, show an object, or even get dressed for the topic. For both competitions, we got together with the English department, okay, with the 4 teachers of English in our school. Well, this is the rules, right? We prepared material, audiovisual material, for example, videos with the rules, examples, tips, etc. And we posted this information on our school Facebook page first, okay, to share this with the community. And then, of course, we shared this with the students by email, WhatsApp, video calls, etc. It was important to use all means of communication, especially because we work in a rural area where many students and even the teachers have problems with connectivity, okay? But even when this connectivity is not stable most of the time, we know that most of our students got information, okay? So we provided the support during the time, okay, with my colleagues by WhatsApp, by phone calls, video calls, etc. To give a more useful experience to the student. Finally, we assessed the activity with the help of 2 other teachers from our school. They are the music teacher and the physical education teacher. They are part of our department because they can speak English. So it was as a fair way to do it, right? Finally, we created an email, okay, like a department email to get the videos, but also we had the chance to receive them by WhatsApp, okay, like with the flexibility of the situation. Okay, in general terms, this is the description of what we did during this time, and well, you will get more information with my fellow teacher Francisca, who will tell you more about what happened after we set the rules and gave instruction. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are very happy here to share our experience with you. And in the first place, I would like to start sharing with you the results of our experience, our educational experience. And it is that most of the students, around 80% of them, were participating in this activity, which means a very high percentage of participations given the context in which we are right now. So it is very important for us to share this experience, so probably you can use it in your own schools, right? Some students think that this experience was really challenging, so they liked it a lot because it involved them working in an independent way, right? Using all the materials that we sent them for them to do the activities by themselves. Some parents say that their children were able to use the materials and also were able to participate and do it without many problems. And some students still think that it is like it's better for them to have an experience in face-to-face contact, but this is not the reality right now. and we just used the same activity. We recycled an activity that they already knew in a different way, right? So we can say that we had very good results. In terms of our conclusions, we would like to tell you that there are different considerations, like the amount of preparation that teachers require to have before starting an activity like this, which requires also a lot of preparation in terms of technical aspects. It is also important to support students so that they feel confident enough to achieve this activity. So we also, even though we had not an asynchronous communication with students, we were able to communicate in different way by means of messages, WhatsApp. Some of them use their emails to communicate with us, so we can also support students and feedback them in a proper way, so they can feel emotionally strong to achieve an activity autonomously, right? And it was very important to consider also the terms of the positive impact that the material had on students. Since we use different sources of materials, written materials, videos, audios, and also we were able to help them every time that they needed it. So the material and also our support and also the encouragement of their parents and families was something that was very useful for them to achieve this activity properly, and also to have a successful activity, right? Another important thing was to select the topics and the levels, and be able to join both of them in a proper way was something really important to have a successful process. For instance, we also heard from Madeleine that she said that students from first grade were adapted the activity for them in a way that they could also participate. So choosing the topics according to the levels and making all the whole community be able to participate was something that was very important to make this activity successful. So we can say that to conclude, we had to consider several elements to make this activity successful, which is basically to have a lot of preparation previously, also be able to understand how families are involved in this process, and also to have a lot of material to help students to work by themselves and to promote autonomy. The way to create different supports like the media involved preparation for the teachers and also for the students to be able to manage aspects such as the volume of their voices, the light, and the approach to the camera. And it is also important to consider the point that we had to give proper context, contents to the students according to their levels.
Okay, we are so sorry, have some technical problems, but we are back now. Thank you so much, Madeleine and Francisca, for sharing the implementation of this relevant project with a spelling bee and a public speaking contest. That was wonderful. Okay, as I mentioned before, if you have any questions for our speakers today, remember to type their names and also in the question section at the right part of your screen. We have been listening to different experiences today, experiences that are very good, very wonderful, full of professional learning. And in this way, now it's the time to present our last poster presenter. From Universidad Austral, Marcelo Andrade brings us Speak, an online teaching method to develop oral production and autonomy in EFL learners.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Marcelo Andrade from Universidad Austral. I'm going to talk about my proposal, which is the methodology whose purpose is to develop different aspects of oral production in EFL students. The name Speak stands for the initials that refer to each stage in the process, which I'll explain in a few minutes. But first, let me tell you how I came up with this idea. Well, since we live in an EFL context, meaning that we don't have English around, our students do not practice outside the classroom what they learn in our classes. But in the classroom, in a 90-minute class, they don't talk as much as we, as teachers, would like. No matter what we do, their practice will not be enough if they don't use their English on a regular basis. So I thought it would be a good idea to give them communicative tasks to perform during the week, in which they could speak in a kind of real life situations, like, for example, talking about their families, describing the cities, etc. Now, these tasks were taken from the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. As you may know, on this document, they propose the action-oriented approach and state the different activities students can do with the language at the different levels. My students were mostly A2 level, so I focused on that. In order to carry out the task, I gave my students the necessary resources, basically a PowerPoint presentation with the grammatical structures, vocabulary, and linking words needed to perform the task. And I included a recording where I read everything on the PowerPoint presentation so they could know how to pronounce the words that they would use in a task sample. Students need to know what we expect from them, right? So this was the scaffolding stage. Now, the second stage, called private practice, is very important, in which students write their answer to the task and have to read it aloud several times until they're ready to record their answers and send it to the teacher through a platform. I used Edmodo, which gave me excellent results. In this step, students have to listen and read the material signed by the teacher, write their answer, and read them aloud, so they are using the 4 skills of the language. The third stage is the evaluation stage, in which I had to listen to the recordings and analyze their speech in 4 aspects: grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, and organization of their ideas. This took a long time, I must confess, but it was worth doing. Now, up to here, this is what everyone does. Teachers normally give their students tasks like recording dialogues, making videos in groups or individually, and then they assess them. I gave them a detailed description of what they did on the performance as a recording. I sent my students a podcast with their feedback through the same platform. I told them about the grammatical structures and words they used well and the ones they have to correct. It was an oral type of feedback, so I could tell them about the mispronounced words and gave them the right form. If you do it on paper, they don't know how to correct their pronunciation, right? Now, what comes next perhaps is different to what most teachers do. After giving them feedback, they have some time to review and study the correction for a new recording. The first one was formative, but the second one was marked. And in that second chance, they had to apply the corrections I gave them on the feedback, and it was not an online task, but face-to-face, without using their notes. For instance, if they had described their families in the first task, in the second task, I gave them the information of a family, for example, names, ages, jobs, etc., as prompts, and they had some minutes to prepare what they were going to say and record their answer using the information given. In this step, I could see if they were really using the information studied previously. The last step was to analyze their speech again and give them their feedback and results through the platform again. For the purpose of the research, I compared both their performance on the first and second tasks and wrote down the results. We did the same process 6 times during the year with different topics. At the beginning of the project, I gave them a diagnostic test and I applied the same test at the end and compared the results. As you could see on the poster, the students improved their pronunciation, their answers were longer, and they used the new words and structures. I have to highlight the fact that the topics used were not the same as the one studied in class. For the assessment of the tasks, I created a rubric based on the statements in the Common European Framework for the levels A1 to B1, since most of my students were basic users of the language, and I could describe their performance based on those criteria. Even though the feedback was detailed, not all the students applied the corrections the second time. Those who did were the ones that had a lower level at the beginning, and I could notice their improvement. I have applied this methodology in many of my classes after the project finished, and students always value the formative stage of it, since the scaffolding phase makes learning easier and they can be better prepared for the final task. And that preparation involves the practice they need outside the classroom. Sometimes they don't have enough time during their everyday lives to practice English. So this was an opportunity to practice in order to prepare the task. I implemented my project with university students. They were engineering students, but they had a lower level of English. So I guess that could be implemented with different types of students at different levels. I haven't tried it myself in primary school or secondary school, but I guess it's a method that could be applied anyway. If you would like to apply this, I suggest you do it with small groups, since it takes a long time, especially to assess and to analyze the recordings. Perhaps in a workshop would work well, and definitely the context in which we are now makes a great opportunity to implement these and make students use their English orally. Thank you. If you have any questions, you can do it, of course, in the next section. Thank you.
On the next section, yes, right, Marcelo. We have received some comments, and one of them says it's a very useful method for our current context. So congratulations, Marcelo. And I agree with that. So thank you very much for sharing this innovative pedagogical proposal to increase university students' speaking time outside the classroom. It was great. In fact, all the presentations today have been inspiring. We want to say hello also to the people connected today from other parts that I didn't mention before. For example, people from Iquique, Rengo, Tomé, Santiago, Casablanca, San Bernardo, Quito, and Ecuador. Very, very many thank yous for being here today. And some of them have questions. So we are going to start asking questions to our presenters in order. So Raul, are you there? The first question is for you. Are you ready, Raul?
Yes, I am ready. Thank you.
Good. Raul, we have been receiving different comments about your awesome presentation, and some of them have saying that they have questions. So, for example, Francisca Ortega says, I love the idea of letting your students to create their own materials. So the question is, what platforms do you use to create these materials? And how accessible are these platforms for teachers and students?
Well, I actually really appreciate that question. I believe that for me, the best answer is to start considering the definition of materials. Personally speaking, I really like Brian Tomlinson's definition, as materials can be anything that learners or teachers use to interact with a language or to explore a language. So basically, the platform can be anything that you would like it to be. They can be the lyrics of a song, they can be the trailer of a movie, they can be even a video game, and of course, you will always have available free options. Personally speaking, in general terms, at least for feedback, as I mentioned during the presentation, I always really prioritize Google Drive because it's a relatively easy to use platform that lets you work collaboratively with each student. You can also create something for each group. It's not very time consuming, and in that sense it's very positive. But other than that, I would say that anything you would like to or your students would like to could be a good possible material if you give it a chance. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, there is also a question regarding the tips you can give us for those students less digitally oriented. How can you say about that?
Well, actually, in my case, it has been really funny because, as I mentioned right before, Google Drive is technically a very easy to use platform, but for me, it has been a lot easier to implement with adult students. With my younger students, children and teenagers, in some cases, I have opted for Google Classroom, for example, since it is something most of them are more familiar with. And as well, we can also be flexible in that sense. For me, that is the key point, being flexible. Maybe sharing materials through email, through WhatsApp, through Facebook, as some colleagues here mentioned. We have to see what alternatives actually work and be responsive as well. Try to understand that not everyone has to be as technological as we could be right now at this point, and try to empathize with that. Having empathy is the key point there, I would say.
Yes, definitely. Very, very important
Mhm.
to know your students and feel empathy. Very,
Mhm.
very nice. Okay, now Camila wants to know, what are the activities you recommend the most to promote autonomy in your students?
About a particular activity, for me, it's activities that are as blank as possible, as empty as possible, where you can have a somehow negotiated instruction, but at the same time, they have to create the materials. They have something to do other than just complying with, for example, a verbal structure. I believe it's very important to arrive to the class with with a flexible mindset as a teacher, and as well to give your students the chance to show you what they like. If you start from there, they will tend to be autonomous on their own right. I think that is very important to connect with their interests, with their needs, and from there, autonomy should just start developing on their own if you give them the right tools.
Nice. Thank you, Raul. And the last
Thank you.
question for you is from
Mhm,
Daniela.
mhm.
And the question is, which advice will you give to the parents to support their children's education?
I am a bit, well, ironically radical in that sense, because I don't really believe that parents should support excessively their children in these kind of situations. I mean, of course, children, especially very young children, may need assistance, but I feel it's also a good time for them to learn how to explore the digital areas that they can do on their own. They may need some help, but first of all, I don't think they need parents to do things for them. They may need some support, some scaffolding. So sometimes the best advice for a parent would be stay back for a little while and see how your child manages. In most cases, I am sure they will. They will do just fine.
Thank you, Raul. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, it's very interesting to listen to you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Okay, now we move on and we have a question for Angela and Esteban. So, okay, first, guys, the audience wants to say thank you for your presentation. It was very creative and very important for the audience. So thank you from them. And now I'm going to say the questions. Andrea starts with this. Do you think if Facebook is going to be a new window for education? A very powerful question.
Yeah, I mean, in our country, it's very useful since it is for free. And actually, what we were talking before creating this is that in some cases, if we go back to school, we can delete our accounts and that's it. It doesn't happen with WhatsApp because WhatsApp, the number continues there. So it's not something that we can delete at some point. So that's a good thing about Facebook, because if we want to keep our privacy as teachers and as people, we can have, because that's why we created our teachers profiles. And regarding the question about if Facebook is gonna be a new tool for learning, I think yeah, it could be, because it has a lot of opportunities. For instance, we were uploading videos, also worksheets, and then I remember that once one of the parents thanked us because he said that he didn't have money for paying, like, because we were also working with Drive, and he said that he didn't have a lot of money for Drive and all the things, and Facebook was easier to use and also was cheaper. And I don't know if Esteban would like to add something to what I'm saying.
Yes. I think that we have to take advantage of all the technological platforms that we have today. So Facebook is one of those. As Angela says, sorry. It has so many options to be used for teaching. So yeah, I think it's a very good tool.
And also you can have live videos, and that's very useful. So you can teach you can have live video teaching something, because kids love to see the English teachers, the song, and all the things. So you can have like a live video and show a class. It can be a 45 minutes class or even less. And I think that could be very useful for them too.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Okay, Josefa now is asking about what's the parents' opinion about using social media for educational purposes.
Okay, so as Angela says, some parents thank us for using this platform, but yes, I think it's it's easier for them, and we have to look for some options to students. I mean, we have many options to teach English in our cases. And I think that if we take advantage of social media in this way, is something that parents can thank, as we said, because it's easier for them, it's easier for children, and it's a different way to teach something that sometimes maybe they don't have, like, they're not willing to learn it. But if you look for some options like Facebook or social media, like I said, yeah, I think it could work really good, really well.
And also, something that we didn't mention in our presentation was that the first thing that parents see when they go on our groups is the rules of the group. So everything is clear at the beginning, like the times that we're gonna be answering their questions and stuff. So they know all the rules, and they know that they have to be respectful in the group. So we didn't have any problem with that. I think we were very lucky because we shared the rules. That was the first thing we did. So some parents didn't know how to use the groups at all, but they were sending us the activities through inbox, and we received a lot of them. And actually, they were expecting the feedback, because sometimes when you didn't reply like a comment or something or activity, they were uploading the activity again because they wanted the feedback, and it was easy for them.
Yeah, it's a very close strategy. Yeah, I agree with you. Well, on that same note, Mario wants to know, what are the issues you have to predict or address to avoid the students' exposition to social media?
I mean, one of the first things was to have the rules, like, because we don't have videos of the kids there. We just have us there, like, showing us, singing, doing things, and we don't expose kids there. Only the activities they are doing, because they take pictures of their notebooks. So in that way, we check the activities, and then sometimes we write on the activity, like through a picture, on a picture, we edit the picture, and then we add the ticks and sometimes emojis and stuff, and then we give the feedback to them. But we don't use like the photos of the kids there or something like that. We try to keep their privacy, and if we need to upload a photo of them, I mean, asking parents is the first thing that we have always thought about.
Okay. Okay, nice. And finally, the last question for you. Vania says, how could you manage to teach speaking strategies to your students using Facebook? Or did you just not take too much attention to these specific skills?
To speaking? Oh yeah,
speaking.
We had an activity related to speaking, but it was related to them to record themselves, the kids recording themselves speaking through pictures. So it was like we sent them like the example in which we had our faces, but they had to show like a flashcard, so a drawing, and they had to explain the drawing. So you can do that if you don't want kids to show their faces, and you can ask them or require them to record the video showing the picture, and that's also something that works because we did that when we wanted to practice speaking. And yeah, I don't know if you still would like to add something to this, but I think you can actually work with all the abilities there, because you can practice listening, and then you can have them writing the answers on the comments, and you can practice writing by asking questions, because that was something that we were also doing. Like, I don't know if you saw on one of the videos that said, what images can you see, or what can you recognize in this video, on this video? So they were writing down the answers. And I think it depends on how you explain or you share the activity the way that they are going to answer. But of course, you have to model the activity, because that's the first thing that teachers had to do.
Well,
Good.
so in my specific case, when we work with little kids, we also share some videos reinforcing the vocabulary. And so they have to see the video, I mean, in their cell phone most of the time. And in that way, they can reinforce the vocabulary in an oral way. But I think it's more focused on the little kids.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great answers, Angela and Esteban. Thank you very much. Now, we have a question for Francisca. So, Francisca, are you there? The question is related to the following. What advice can you give if I want to replicate the experience in my school?
Okay, according to our experience, we think it's very important to consider the context of each school, because not all schools have the same reality, or students have the same access to technology or internet. So in our case, internet, it's an issue, right? So what we did was providing students with different sources to help them to achieve this activity correctly. So if we were a school with high levels of internet access, probably we could do something like teach a lesson and do something like a real class in real time. But the truth is that we didn't have the possibility at the time that we started organizing this contest to access to those opportunities. So what we did basically was giving them all the alternatives for checking by themselves the rules, the formats, and the alternatives that they had to send the activity, right? And we also considered the levels of the students, because we were not able to ask the student of first or second grade to do a spelling how it is known itself, because they haven't even achieved the letters in their mother tongue. So what we did was to adapt the activity to their levels, to make them participants of this context, contest, and it's very important for you to consider if you have to adapt this activity to your reality. It is something really useful for you to make students use English as much as they can.
Exactly, Francisca. It's very important to consider the context of each school. Thank you for your answer. Well, finally, we have a question for Marcelo. But first, Marcelo, I want to say to you that the audience is full of love for you. They love your presentation. They are on fire. So thank you for your presentation.
Thanks.
Okay, well, the first question for you is from Carmen. Carmen says, I'd love to implement this methodology within my classes. Do you have any pieces of advice to work with some students with reading comprehension difficulties?
Well, my presentation was about speaking, developing speaking, but yeah, well, you can implement this with those students through a platform. So you can, the scaffolding stage, I think, is the most important in the process, because it's the one in which the teacher helps, and it could be individually for these type of students. So I think that's the most important stage. So you can send specific materials to certain students which have certain difficulties, and give them more scaffolding. It depends on the context, and it depends on the type of difficulties, etc. But I think you can make it like more personalized in that case. So you can send the scaffolding materials and resources to all students, but if one student needs a little bit more support, you can personalize that and send individually more help, I would say. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marcelo. The next question is from Pedro. And Pedro asks, what were the topics you used to improve your students' pronunciation?
Okay, the thing is that in the tasks I selected, I went to the Common European Framework of Reference, and for example, for A2 level, for example, they suggest certain topics. So I took the different topics that students should know in that level. For example, in A1 and A2, etc. For example, they should know to indicate what the weather is like, for example, in a town, or they should know how to talk about a city. They should know about how to give directions, etc. So I took all the suggestions from the document, and I separated, or I could separate, the different topics, and I included those. So I gave a PowerPoint presentation, as I said before, which was, for example, about describing a city. And that included, for example, buildings in a city, included the weather, for example, and different aspects. So the PowerPoint presentation included many aspects of describing a city. So I tried to cover the language needed, or the range of vocabulary needed for that specific topic, which included subtopics. So, and then I read every word they needed to use, and embedded, a file with the pronunciation for each of the words, so that they could hear the words, and then when they use them, they could listen to the model and practice it. That's basically it.
Yeah, very useful tips, Marcelo. Thank you very much. Okay, Catalina is concerned about the podcasts, and she wants to know, are these podcasts meant to be public, or are they only recorded for educational objectives?
Well, only for the learning goal in the class. So I used a platform which is Edmodo. Edmodo is a free platform, and it's a very good one to upload material to a class. So I asked them to to record a podcast. So through the platform, they uploaded the podcast to the class, but nobody else saw that. So it was like individually, and only the teacher has access to that. So when they uploaded the file, I could listen to them, analyze them, and then send feedback through a podcast also to individually to the students. So it was like individually, and nobody else listened to that. I was concerned about that because I think that our students would not like everyone to listen to their pronunciation or what they do. So I think it's doing in that way, one-to-one, I think it's better. And for their, they might not be, sorry, it would not be convenient to expose, the work of someone because they might feel ashamed or shy or whatever. So I think it's better to do it that way.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, okay. And one of the last questions is from Antonio. And maybe you mentioned some of these topics before, but he wants to know what was the framework you used to set, which are the high frequency words?
Okay, the thing is that there is there's a website, a Cambridge website about that tells you that which level is the vocabulary. So, for example, if you enter A1, A2, etc., they tell you the vocabulary for that level. So, for example, if you write, well, there are different websites, but anyway, I took it from the level that I was teaching. I was teaching A1, A2, and B1 level, because in my class I had the three students from the three levels. So they were using different vocabulary, but I gave them the ones that were according to that specific level. So there are ways and websites, Cambridge websites, on that you can, where you can enter some vocabulary and it tells you what level the word is. But and also there are in Cambridge websites, there are files in which that you can download. And for example, if you are working with A2 level, that means the key test. So the key English test. So if you go to Cambridge Support for Teachers, you find a list for that level, a list of vocabulary that is included for A2. Or if you are teaching B1 level, and you can enter B1 in Cambridge English Support, and they give you a list of words that are used for that specific level, B1, for example. So I used all those resources to know what vocabulary to include for what level. So if that answers the question.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Marcelo, for your answer. And thank you to all our speakers today. It has been a wonderful session thanks to your knowledge and experiences during this difficult time. So, Raul, Angela, Esteban, Madeleine, Francisca, and Marcelo, many thanks for this opportunity. We are also grateful for our audience today. We appreciate all the comments and support you have given to us. Remember, you can download and read all the posters from our website, expanding.fundacionoportunidad.cl. You are all more than welcome to join us tomorrow for the last activity of our seminar, together with the Efficient Language Coaching founder, Rachel Palin, at 11 o'clock in the morning. You can also find this information in our website, expanding.fundacionoportunidad.cl. Finally, we will be sending you a follow-up email on Friday, so you can give us your feedback for the seminar. It's very important for us to know your opinion. On behalf of Fundación Educacional Oportunidad and Universidad de La Serena, thank you all again for being here. Have a wonderful evening.